We do have a lot of cookies in the room behind here, so please, we're going to get some plastic bags so we can take some home with you. And we give grateful thanks to the conference staff, and I will turn the meeting over to them. So welcome and thanks for being here.
So I'm going to try to be careful not to blow out the mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here. I get to serve as your conference minister, Darrell Goodwin, but tonight is actually supposed to be Reverend Dr. David Cleaver Bartholomew, who is our Director of Stewardship and Engagement, but he had a little minor eye surgery today. So we thought, we got a good idea to drive to try to run this event tonight. So you're stuck with me, but then we have some great presentations for tonight. Part of this program was envisioned to help in all 3 of our states do a deep dive on 2 of our ministries. And then I'll do a little bit of a quick overview of some sort of conference missional pieces. But tonight we're going to be talking about the Center for Transformational Leadership and talking about our digital ministry. The purpose of the Ministry Matters program is that every year it'll sort of rotate with different departments within the conference context so that you get a little bit more of an intimate understanding of programs, services, and offerings that might be available to you in your context. And we hope that the people here will whisper and tell some other folks about what you are seeing here tonight. For those of you who are attending the Grow event, it's different in the sense that at the Grow event, you spend a lot of time talking to each other, and unfortunately or fortunately, we spend a lot more time talking at you at this event so that you get more information. And so after each presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask some deeper questions about what you saw in the presentation, specific outputs for that ministry, to make sure that you have clarity about what services are available to you that can be, of course, implemented at your local church. I'm going to ask people to just briefly say your name and maybe what congregation you're coming from so we know who's in the room, and then I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Eric. But why don't we start with you?
Phoebe B. Dunn. And I've been coming to this church most of my life.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
See,
Fran Graveson, member in discernment in Central Massachusetts and member at United Parish of Compton.
Thank you so much.
Debbie Kirk, SNEUCC conference staff for Faith Formation, and I'm a member of First Church in Woodstock, Connecticut.
Awesome. Go David.
I'm David Graham, SNEUCC Congregational.
And he's also our digital minister for the night.
And when I started in the first church, like the first confirmational church.
this church.
But now I'm over here.
I'm Jennifer Deary.
I'm a member at Barrington Congregational Church.
I'm Patty Kogan. I am your area conference minister for the Southeast region, and particularly this evening for the Rhode Island Association.
Joy,
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Karen Zeal. I'm the Assistant Director of the Center for Transformational Leadership of the Southern New England Conference, and I get to share some good stuff with you tonight. So thanks for hosting us.
Charlie Simonson, member of the Amicable Church in Tiverton.
I'm Betty Ann Brown, and I'm from SNEUCC Congregational Church, long time member.
Pat Smith from SNEUCC Congregational.
Liz Sadie, SNEUCC Congregational. Vivian Dione, SNEUCC Congregational.
I'm Virginia Child. I'm a member of the Union Congregational Church.
Ruth Shaver, member at Second Church in Attleboro and interim bridge pastor at Lakeville United Church of Christ and North Congregational Church in Middleborough. I did. I'm Raquel Ray. I'm an associate
I'm Graham Van Kuren. I'm a pastor of the Summersville Congregational Church in Somers, Connecticut.
I'm George Peters. I'm pastor emeritus at Chapel Street, Lincoln, Rhode Island. I'm a member of the church.
I'm Craig Mace, trustee here at City.
You just walked in, correct?
I just walked in. I'm Craig Mace. I'm the chairman of the music and what's coming.
Kathy Stroy, I'm a member here with you. William Jennings, SNEUCC.
I just want to say, Joy, this is the third one we've had. You have the most members of your church to attend. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to share with you a little bit about digital ministry. This was one of the new ministries we added when the new conference was formed, based on the reality that we were all living in and the need to be able to connect with our churches in a digital format. So I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Darrell. So, I'm Eric. I'm delighted to serve as your digital minister. Prior to joining the SNEUCC staff, my professional background has been audio-visual conference and convention production services, IT system design and installation, and electronics engineering. I am currently, I put air quotes around that, a vocational deacon in the Episcopal Church for more than 2 decades, married to a UCC pastor, Graham Van Kuren. Graduated from Andover Newman Theological School with a Master of Divinity. I lead a joint UCC Episcopal Church in Springfield, Massachusetts called Church Without Walls, and which serves the homeless and disenfranchised. I am most recently a member in discernment.
It's about time.
That's all lies.
The calling I have as your digital minister spans the worlds that I have inhabited quite well. I started my time with you in November of 2020. And I am so thankful for my vocation and calling here. In autumn of 2020, most if not all churches in our conference still had their doors closed to in-person worship. Some communities continue to struggle to offer worship and other programming digitally to their members, while others started to refine what they were already doing. But one thing that we found out is that regardless of size and how far away you could have the slight advantage from the television, and the fact that it happens that a digital minister can give you good. So that many churches, regardless of size and budget, continue to utilize digital. Retain members from not only in their towns and in their areas, but from across the country and around the world. During 2021, I spent a lot of time in video conference calls, many of them one-on-one Zoom sessions with churches, teaching how to integrate and use technology to best strengthen the church. We developed basic guides churches could follow to get off the ground or get up to speed or expand. Those resources are available on the conference's website on the digital page at sneucc.org/digital. Fast forward to our present time, our churches aren't in panic mode anymore, unless you're flight advancer. And you have to call upon the conference minister. So with that in mind, I still assist integrating hardware, cameras, switchers, mixing consoles of various kinds, and I point to the best practices for building community on social. The difference now being a shift in the focus in the ways in which we increase the digital participants' role in a hybrid setting. So where many people are worshiping in person but still have a significant number, in some ways a growing number of people continue to worship digitally, we focus on binding them to the service in ways that promotes growth. While some churches have really experienced a great deal of digital fatigue and just want to get back to the way things were, I find that many churches are being much more strategic in the ways they are thinking about integrating digital ministries into the life of their congregation. Sometimes the questions that arise are complicated enough for an in-person visit. So in addition to Zoom consultation, I schedule a very limited and shrinking number of in-person consultations when the need arises, and I'll get to more about that later. Another way that I directly support churches is through a weekly Zoom discussion I lead called the Tech Deacons Roundtable. So for me, it's like having office hours, open office hours. For an hour or so on Tuesdays, alternating between morning and evening sessions, I gather with a group of folks from all over the conference who are interested in advancing the digital ministries of their churches. Some people bring specific questions about best practices. Others are there to listen and learn from others. Some people drop in for a week at a time and then come back when they have another issue to bring up to the group. Others are there every week, listening, learning, and expanding all our thinking about what is possible and what is desirable, even at this end of the pandemic. If you know folks in your congregation involved in digital ministries of your church, and please invite them to check out one of the upcoming Tuesdays. Again, the schedule can be found at the on the digital ministry page, SNEUCC/digital. You'll find the next upcoming meeting on the left-hand side of the web page, on the left pane. Moving forward, we will be entering into covenantal partnerships with a select group of our active tech deacons who do participate at the Tech Deacon Roundtables. And they will serve as digital ministry coaches. So we are shifting from me kind of trying to prove the point of bilocation across, like, how many miles? Across 3 states, right?
Right.
So we feel that effectively having coaches will not only be able to minister in a way that makes more sense to your local area, but actually you probably get a response faster. And in all that, also lifting up the gifts and the skill sets of those folks that you know in your area. Another area of ministry that has come into fruition is the conference's hybrid in a box system, or what I like to call the HIB. The HIB is a portable, all-in-one live streaming and video conference system that can be set up in a variety of environments. The HIB system enables the conference to offer basic live streaming or fully hybrid events in spaces that aren't presently configured for it. Fully hybrid events enables those who participate digitally an equal opportunity to fully participate as worship leaders, moderators, and panelists. One good example of the HIB in action, if you heard of, or if you were attended, either remotely or in person, the Justice Summit from last fall, you came in contact with that, you were participating with that system. So all that is needed at a minimum for the HIB system to work is a hardwired internet connection. A third area of digital ministry that I'd like to say a few words about this evening is our Metaverse pilot program that our conference is actively exploring now. So one might ask, if you haven't been kind of beat over the head by the news, is what is the Metaverse? And of course, we, depending on what network where you get your news from, and how many times went and read articles, the definition of what the metaverse could or could not be, or what is, kind of changes and morphs as time goes along. But in a nutshell, the metaverse encompasses virtual reality, and of course, when we think of virtual reality, we think of strapping a headset across your face. Augmented reality or extended reality. So the metaverse can be any technology. So again, I think my focus tonight is to move you away from the thinking that the only way you can interact with the metaverse is, through a pair of a headset. Into any type of technology that augments or supplements your physical experience in real life, or in like what we would say, in person or in the building. The metaverse is seen as the next iteration of the internet. The first iteration of the internet can be characterized when static web pages were the norm. Like if I say the words AOL, you could probably fill in your mind what sound goes along with AOL when you were trying to connect to the AOL servers, right? That was web version 1. Web version 2 was the move from having and absorbing and getting content from a laptop or a desktop computer onto your mobile device, your cell phone, your tablet. The third iteration will be the metaverse. That's Web 3.0. So the concept may not sound so dystopian if you recognize what elements of the metaverse you have already encountered. And so this is an example of a Hyundai that is driving down the road with a heads-up display, and across the driver's windshield are not only directions, but also a map of where you're headed. So that is one version of that. The next version is, if you've ever used one of the apps, you can raise your hand. You don't have to be embarrassed. If you wanted to find out what a piece of furniture would look like in your room.
Yep.
So that is IKEA. I believe Home Depot makes one. Which one did
I actually used IKEA, and Warby Parker is another one that has the try-on glasses thing.
My Warby Parker was on. So, or how about Pokemon Go? There you go. So you've already used it. So again, the metaverse is going to be the next shift in the way we communicate digitally. So with this in mind, our conference is developing a pilot program in conjunction with our metaverse partner, Solace VR, to explore the metaverse in incorporating enriched ministry experiences such as worship, guided meditation, Christian ed. And our national setting has taken notice of this and has recognized the importance of this ministry and has awarded the Congregational Church of Bloomfield in Bloomfield, Connecticut, a $15,000 CASA grant in order to continue this effort. Interesting enough is the Solace VR, the company who is building, and again, we're not simply in partnership with Solace VR for them to build something that already exists within a certain platform. We're actually spinning up an app, a native app of our own. And why this is important is when AI, and the focus of AI, like OpenAI and ChatGPT came up, which I'll touch base in a second, when that kind of like percolated to the top about 2 months ago, Microsoft thought it would have been really, really cool to save face and to save some money and spin up another project. The thing was, a lot of churches were using a platform based on Microsoft's technology, and I think it was about a month ago, they just turned off the switch. So there were a couple of UCC churches, smaller UCC churches in the metaverse. General Theological Seminary and Virginia Theological Seminary were partnered, and they were spinning up a church. It just all went dark, and so they will be hopefully adopting Solace VR as their platform, because right now we're the ones giving out hope. So I cannot conclude my time with you today without mentioning ChatGPT. GPT standing for a generative pre-trained transformer. It's an advanced artificial intelligence program written by OpenAI and hosted by Microsoft. That is designed to, and I think most of us have some either heard about this technology, at least in the news or in the news feeds, or at least tried it out yourself. But this is a technology that generates human-like text to prompts that you type into a web page. This technology is trained by scraping huge amounts of data from the internet and can perform different language tasks like answering questions, generating sentences, translating text, coming up with prayers, writing sermons. They really don't sound good. Basically, ChatGPT gives you drafts of anything you tell it to do. At least I'll put my statement on it. It gives me drafts that I can change and work with. Interesting thing, ChatGPT gained 100 million active users in 1 month. And what we've all been using is actually, if you went to ChatGPT on the OpenAI site, that's not even public release software. That's actually beta software. Google came out with their version of ChatGPT called Bard, and it fell flat on its face. But since then, and that was about a month and a half ago, since then, Bard has been rapidly trained. So you'll see, Graham and I asked my husband how much YouTube videos we watch, technology YouTube videos we watch during the evening. We saw one last night where you can give this, so if you're looking for a hymn, you're looking for some piece of music you want to lay, a piece of music you want to lay on beneath a video that you're working on. We saw one where you could say, and the more specific you get in the prompt, it will not only compose the music for you, but at given points along a timeline, it will change the music and the mood and the pitch. So I saw that last night and I was like, wow, this is... So this is a very small sample. This is a very small sample of what's going on within digital ministry and the Life Over Conference. So again, I'm very grateful to be a part of this effort, and I thank you for allowing me to present this evening.
Be careful though of this. So I tried this, my husband and I last night, and I said, who is the Reverend Darrell Goodwin? He said, he's the former conference minister of the Southern New England Conference. And he's the current president of Chicago Theological Seminary. So I got a promotion. You can't correct it and say wrong. So we're going to take a few minutes and ask Eric if you have some deeper questions. Ruth.
So, Eric, is there going to be any outreach between the digital VR ministry here and the Second Life Church that's authorized and working with the South Central Conference and always has a presence at General Synod?
Yeah, are they on AltSpace?
I'm not sure where they are, but they have a website and they're active. They've been active for 7 years. It's a very website.
And so don't quote me, but I'm fearing and I'm hoping that they're not, but they may have been one of the folks who were on AltSpace. I can look it up if I want.
Well, their website's
not that I'm going to do something, not that I'm going to do other things while my colleague is giving her presentation, but I think that
well, their website is still live, so if that's any.
Right, the website may be live, but is there metaverse platforms still live?
That I don't know, but I do know that as of a couple of weeks ago, they were planning to have a presence at General Synod.
Oh, good.
So at least there's that.
So perhaps they pivoted.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know or who haven't seen them, they started out in Second Life, which was the original kind of VR thing. And they actually went through the whole accrediting process with the South Central Conference. They're the only, or at least the first, mainline denominational all virtual congregation to have standing in a denomination.
Right, and then you can be applauded for
And,
that.
yeah, and they have real life pastors who do their work in virtual space. And it's just a very cool thing.
It is.
So.
And you know what's to speak more about that, folks who really were on, not even on the cutting edge, but bleeding edge of this stuff, they didn't walk into a space that was already rendered. So what do I mean by rendered? I mean a space that, has a, like, again, like, when you, in some platforms, when you say, okay, I want to have a presence in the metaverse, and you create a community, you're just like, you don't have a floor, you don't have walls, you don't have grass, you don't have anything. And those folks actually built that stuff like brick by brick, like you're talking like Legos, and that's what's so sad about Altspace, because a lot of the stuff in Altspace was built like that. And it's just, I mean, Microsoft said, in a month and a half, we will be, spitting that down. You can pull all your digital assets. Digital assets meaning, it's not a lectern, but it's a digital lectern in the metaverse. You can pull all that out, but it's really hard when you put that much work into it. Okay.
I work at the conference and I'm hearing something new that I'd like to explain a little bit more because we saying you do not understand what you're saying. About the working with this group to create like an app around stuff. Can you just explain that in language that we could understand?
Sure. So what we are creating, we're creating an experience. So as you would come to a church, right? What's the address of this church?
604 River Avenue.
Okay. You know where it's located. In the metaverse, again, Web 3.0, you can create pretty much any building you want if you were going after a building, right? You can create church in a park, okay? You can render, or you can create anything you would like. The difference between what folks who were pioneers in this stuff early on had to create all their stuff themselves. Solace VR is coming out with predefined spaces. So you could, when you first log on to this app, you're on your laptop and you're like, well, what do you want? Oh, and by the way, you don't have to have a headset on to participate. Here's the other thing, it's going to be hybrid. So if you want to join and you have a laptop or you have a cell phone, you'll be able to participate fully, in the life of that community. So who has time to build stuff from scratch? Nobody. So the idea is that folks, a church that is willing and has the forward vision to meet, don't have to create things from scratch and can spin up something pretty easily. Like you would open up a template in Word for whatever you need. Same thing. And you get to customize the space to your liking. But then after you create your space, you're then, the way the app works in the metaverse, people will know you're there. And so this is another way to outreach to others in a digital way. Just like you would put a sign outside the door or have an ad on Facebook or post on Instagram. The same thing applies, but in a fully digital spot.
Yeah, what would we do in the rooms?
You can create worship experiences.
Okay.
Meditation, like I mentioned, you do worship, meditation,
So it's an alternative to sort of doing a kind of virtual thing. It's a forum in which virtual activities can happen in a different way than maybe we could do by just having a live stream on Facebook.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you know how much. So, and here's one of the advantages that we see as an advantage. We don't, we'll tell you, again, it's highly experimental, so, give us 2 years. But you know how much effort it takes to create an event in real life. Right? Imagine spinning that up in 20 minutes.
Wow.
That's the difference.
So, we haven't talked about this, and this is not a planted question. So I'm just building off your question here.
We had no conversations in the car.
I'm thinking of my own church's Easter Sunday morning experience. Now, down the road, if there was a sunrise Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem template, my church might use that for a sunrise service on Easter Sunday, and we could gather around the tomb of Christ on, in this Web 3.0 space. We can gather around the tomb of Christ.
Yeah, and then like also, so let's shift it out of the church we're on, out of the faith communities. It has been used to teach about the beloved community in a way, and this is like one slice of it, where you can go to a workshop and watch a video, or you can be like in the actual circumstance that is happening all around you, standing in the middle of it. So in learning environments, it's very like you're digital, but you're embodied in that environment.
I'm just going to leave that world for a little while.
Sure.
Noticing that as congregations do open back up again and come back into in-person worship, I've noticed at a couple of different churches that we now all just want to put the camera in the back of the room and just live stream what's happening in the room. And my experience is you lose your online audience when you do it. So basically what we're saying is that you need to be doing 2 worship services or 60-70% more work for 2 worship services, so to speak, in being able to actually do an online worship service that people online want to watch. And then we're now talking about even 3.0, which would be a completely different worship service than what's happening in the room. And I just wanted to understand, like, you agreed with me with what I said, but what percentage of churches are being able to maintain that dual status, and which ones are not able to do that right now?
I couldn't tell you for. I'm going to say it's something, I know that many have put everything away, including my own church. So I make it my home church where I'm currently serving in East Longmeadow at St. Mark's. We went from 4 PTZ cameras, a stationary camera, confidence monitors on the floor, discreetly, placed so that the worship leaders can interact in real time with the folks who are posting joys and concerns, on Facebook, which is another conversation, because some folks may not want to post joys and concerns on Facebook, but some just post a word. Okay? So we went from that, where we were very interactive. Yes, and for a worship leader, it's difficult. I mean, when you have folks, in front of you to constantly be doing, it takes a lot of work. You can only sustain that for so much and for so long if you don't have the support of your tech team. Or in the case of St. Mark's in East Longmeadow, we went from 5 days of worship service with 3 times. We went from three times a day. We went from morning prayer, noonday prayer, and evening prayer, 3 times a day, 5 days a week for 2 years straight. Nonstop. And we had separate sections of the church carved out specifically for certain things. So it kind of got halfway what you're talking about. It's like and I can explain this, later, I don't want to intrude here. But if you don't have if you're, we basically wore out. We wore out our 12 volunteers, our 12 producers. We wore them out. Of those 12, 6 have not returned back to church. Because they were doing full-on productions. But again, 3 times a day, 5 days a week. So, be careful with decisions you make in the parking lot.
But I can, I think that's going to be very difficult for a small church like mine with 100 members. But I think the power of the conference might be able to do things on behalf of all the churches.
Right.
Special events from time to time.
And what we've seen is, at least in like conversations I've had with digital ministry consultations, is you'll have, I don't know the area too well, if at all, but I'm sure you have neighboring congregations, maybe congregations that cross denominational lines, and you pull your resources together. So as opposed to doing, every Sunday, or if you have a service in the midweek, you start pull that together with your neighbors, and that's where ministry is activated, because ministry is always better when you're in community with other people, as opposed to trying to do it alone.
I'm going to do one more question. Eric, Karen, and I will be all available for all of the cookies and brownies and treats. I heard there's a Rhode Island one day, which I'm not exactly sure what that is. And some other treats. But anybody have a burning last question for Karen? Okay. Thank you, Eric. I will say one of the things we're working on right now is we have about 12 ministerial staff on conference staff. So each of them has been over the last few months recording a series of sermons that they will also be, well, Eric actually is helping to edit those, put the subject, the scriptures, the title, of what exactly is happening in that sermon, as well as we're collecting digital resources for music and pieces of the worship service, so that if you are taking 2 Sundays off, or you want, pastor's taking a break, or you're wanting to be able to still live stream something in the worship experience that people might have familiarity with or they have connected with, then you'll have a bank of at least 20 plus sermons that are instantly available to you from video. I think is that really going to be fair? Available, as well as music and digital content. So that's one of the pieces of the ministry that Eric is continuing to do, even in this endemic time, to make sure it's available. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Karen Zeal, who serves as the Assistant Director of the Center for Transformational Leadership, and open your ears and your hearts for the tour she's about to do. Come on up there.
It's a little different everywhere we go. That's beautiful to have a monitor. I have to say, thank you for the space this evening. It's really quite lovely, and I'm just really drawn to this piece behind me, the cross. I just think that it's absolutely lovely. I have a daughter who's a sculptor, and I know that she would appreciate a piece like that. Whoever creativity and imagination helped to design that. It's just lovely. So thank you for your hospitality this evening. As Reverend Durrell said, I am Karen Zeal. I'm the Assistant Director of the Center for Transformational Leadership, and you might say, what is that? Well, I have the pleasure tonight of telling you a little bit about that, and so I'm glad to be with you. On behalf of our team, which is a 3-person team, and we are the director and the director for this, Together We Thrive, Reverend Heather Ramsey-Maubourg, who is the director of our center. And if you don't know her, you would enjoy meeting her. She sends her greetings this evening to you all. Together We Thrive is a clergy thriving initiative funded by a Lilly grant, and we are in our
5th and final year of my grant. I'm planning for sustainability, and so she and the team have had a busy year, and a lot of the goodness of what has happened together with Thrive will translate in future years to the Center for Transformational Leadership. So that is Heather. She's the director. I'm the assistant director, and we are in search of a program program support associate. So the third member of our team remains anonymous this evening, but we are in the middle of a search, and we will be happy to introduce you to them as soon as they create a covenant with us in the near future. So the Center for Transformational Leadership was an idea of the executive leaders of the new conference, the Southern New England Conference, and its actual genesis was June 1st of 2021. And so we've been making the road by walking, so to speak, and we have a lot of programs and opportunities to offer to you. First, though, I wanted to tell you about how and where to find information. On our website, which is sneucc.org, you will go to the purple box, which represents the value of the new conference to bring new life as agents of change. And there, when you click on that purple box, you'll see another purple box. And that's up at the top left-hand there. It says Center for Transformational Leadership. Yeah, that one. And then you'll open the landing page of the center, which has a statement about who we are and what we do as a center. The Center for Transformational Leadership equips clergy and lay leaders, congregations, and covenantal partners of the Southern New England Conference United Church of Christ with resources and tools and support to create a new vision and do the transformational ministry that you are called to in the local church and in your community. And that's why we exist. And so below that beautiful butterfly and that description of our goals and our purpose, you will find that our resources are designated into several categories, including assess and discern, and conflict transformation, and leadership development, and nurture. You'll also find some special resources there. You'll find the resiliency time capsule, which I'll talk a bit about a little bit later. You will find some information about grant programs as they are offered through the conference, and then you will find our newsletter, which is called Innovation Now, and we'd like to invite you to subscribe to that newsletter. And when you get it in your email box, it looks like this. It has original articles. Currently, there's an ongoing series on legacy by our church legacy specialist, Charlie Kuchenbrode. You'll find staff picks of articles we're finding in the landscape that we think have relevance and may be of interest to you. You will find some seasonal kinds of columns, like Because You Asked, which is if someone asks a question and we think it has wider application, we'll share those resources and tools with all of you by naming the question and answering the question in the context of that column. Also, sometimes we're talking about what we're reading and other things that we're doing as a team. And then a lot of upcoming events, obviously, and programs and opportunities we want you to be aware of. So this is one of those slides that populates. You might have to click this one a couple of times. Thanks, Eric. So obviously our key areas of focus are innovation, small churches, leadership development, and assessment and discernment for congregations regarding their future. In innovation, we like to tell stories of innovation. We tell those in Innovation Now and in a variety of different ways. We will be helping to develop programs for change leadership and transformation, ongoing development of programs for those purposes, telling stories of inspiring partnerships, and so on. In terms of small churches, we like to celebrate the uniqueness of small churches. They are a gift to the body of Christ. And so our job is to resource them and support them and to know their uniqueness and to make sure that there are resources that are applicable to their mission and ministry, which is, as we said, unique. In terms of leadership development, we are equipping and empowering folks, you all, us all, I'm a member of the church too, for discipleship and service. So for the good work that God calls us to, both within the gathered community and outside our doors. And finally, assessment and discernment, supporting churches to prepare for their future. Working with congregations, doing some deep listening. What are the challenges you're facing? What are some of the resources and tools you believe might be helpful to you? And how can we support or accompany you and guide you along the way? And we offer a lot of formational opportunities, programs, webinars, workshops, designed to gather folks together, to share best practices, to learn new strategies, to think carefully together. And some of those you'll see that have taken place since we were developed in June of 2021. We held a small church summit in February of 2022, where representatives from over 55 churches in the Southern New England Conference had folks gather. And so 86 people came together from 55 churches. We have offered, and Ruth, raise your hand. We had the benefit of Ruth Shaver's gifts in offering a UCC polity webinar for lay leaders and for clergy, and just beautifully done, and we will do that again with your, yes, thank you. With your graciousness and generosity, we will do that again.
A question on that one. Will that be, you know how we get the weekly newsletters from Tiffany and they have what's going on? Will that be in the newsletter?
Sure. All of our major opportunities and programs, we try to make sure they get into 5 things in a timely fashion too. So even though we have them in our own newsletter and feature them there, we like to feature them in 5 things so people know what's happening. It's better to hear twice than not at all, right? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We had programs in 2022 on developing and using behavioral covenants. If your church has a behavioral covenant or you know about a behavioral covenant, you know that it is a beneficial way to offer a community healthy boundaries for good communications and good ministry together, right? And so we had the benefit of having 2 of our national staff, Tara Barber and Elizabeth Dilly, come and be with us and help us to learn more about behavioral covenants. We heard from Susan Beaumont about leading in a liminal season, and that was a program co-sponsored together with Together We Thrive. So some of these programs are standalones from the CTL, and some of them are in collaboration with Together We Thrive. And we also offered with Reverend Dr. Sarah Drummond, the Groundbreakers, blah, 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 a Groundbreakers breakfast group, where for 3 months, 27 or 30 people got together at 7 o'clock in the morning, or 7:30 in the morning, go figure, and read 3 wonderful books about the changing landscape of church and ministry. One of them was The Great Unraveling by Alan Roxburgh, and The Innovative Church by Scott Kermode, and another one was Another Way by Williams, Lewis, and Baker. Great way to look at how and why we gather as people of faith. So 3 great books, a great discussion later, and even though we all got up early, we had our coffee and we had a great time. So we hope that some of these programs give you an idea of the kinds of things we're doing. The lower left-hand or lower right-hand corner there, the slide represents the basics training for church leaders, which we offered actually this February. And we offered trainings for moderators, for pastoral support group representatives, and also for treasurers. And we will continue to offer those kinds of basic programs for folks who have different roles in the life of the church. In addition, are you ready? Contemplative Christian Practices series. Matt Carricker just finished, I don't know if you know him, he's the leader of the Agape Church in Waltham, Massachusetts, a wonderful spiritual leader in our midst. And he offered a 6-part series on contemplative Christian practices. A nice group of people gathered for 6 weeks, every other week, and had an opportunity to lean into what those practices mean for their own life and the life of their church recently. And that has just concluded. And Matt will be offering more programs of this type for us. We have a Writing for Clergy affinity group hosted and led by Reverend John Hudson, who's well known in our midst as a writer and a supporter of writers, and who loves the craft deeply and who loves to spend time with people who also love the craft. We've offered and are continuing in June a series of small church roundtables. So just an opportunity, like the digital communication roundtables, for folks who identify. We don't give you any parameters. You self-identify as being from a small church and want to come together and talk about practices and joys and challenges and some of the things perhaps that are suggested for development in small congregations for future vitality and sustainability. We have a Lunch and Learn series. Has anybody been with us on a Thursday, third Thursday of the month from noon to 1:30 or 1? Yeah, just an hour. That's our Lunch and Learn series. Eric, why don't you go ahead maybe? Let me see if it's the next slide. It's not going. Okay. I'm not going to quite delve into Lunch and Learn yet then. I'm going to talk about curated tools and resources. On our website, you will find lists of curated tools and resources. We also have many tools and resources to offer you. And so we would just welcome you to reach out and tell us, what are your needs? What are you hoping for? What are you looking for? What are your needs? Some of the things, obviously, based on our sort of key focuses in the Center for Transformational Leadership are things like programs and opportunities and resources for clergy and lay leadership development. Structure and governance. We get a lot of calls about, are my bylaws relevant? And if not, what do I need to do? And so we have resources and also consultants that we can recommend to you who do this work and do it very well. We came through the pandemic time with a lot of anxiety and fear. Go figure, right? How did that happen? Well, we were all busy scrambling. We were trying to figure it out. Everybody was trying to get Eric on the phone. And things were happening in real time at a quick pace, right? And so we're not always at our best when we're living in a state of a sense of undue urgency or fear and anxiety. And sometimes congregations need a little help in surfacing something that lies beneath that's preventing them from being their best selves. Or sometimes they need a little help because that thing has come to the surface and, oh my goodness, Mrs. Smith isn't talking to Mrs. Jones anymore. And we love them both. And it's painful. So we have a lot of resources and we have had some programs. In November of 21, we had a program on conflict management, a day-long training from the good folks at Lombard Mennonite Peace Center. And so developing and also sharing resources on conflict management and again, change and transformation. And my goodness, what does that mean to any or all of us, right? What's transformational to me might be different than what's transformational to you. But we know transformation when we experience it, right? And we know that there are ways to prepare for it. In terms of innovation, I've read a really good book that was recommended to me by Charlie Kugenbrook. It's called Innovating for Love by Kenny Creasy Dean. And she talks about the fact that she has sort of a love-hate relationship with the word innovation. She doesn't think that it's the right word for what we're hoping to do and what we're attempting to do in the church. But for lack of a better word, it's the word that we're using, right? But she talks about we're our best transformative selves when we're passionate about what it is we want to and need to do, and about watching a vision formulate before our eyes and taking the resources that we have and can bring to bear and leaning into that passion and using our gifts and skills creatively for the body of Christ. So it's a great book if you haven't read it. Small chapters, lots of good work pages in the back. There's a great appendices with some good process work pages. And during the reading of the chapters, as she's explaining, how she understands transformation and innovation, there's some beautiful stories in gray boxes about congregations that are doing transformative and creative ministry. And it might seem really simple, some of these stories, but for them, it's the thing that gets them unstuck. So, I think that's a sermon and not an introduction to the Center for Transformational Leadership. Let's go on. So we do have more offerings. We have done programs, webinars, and workshops on financial literacy and budgeting and for treasurers, as I mentioned, conflict management strategies, creating flexible governance structures, resiliency, and so forth and so on. And you can go on to the next. I think I already talked about most of that, Eric. Thanks. And there's the lunch learn reminder, 1 hour, the third Thursday of the month from noon to 1, a bite-sized, sort of, our little imagination was a bite-sized taste of something that might be important to you in the life of the church. And so we're hoping to pick topics that are mentioned in the calls that we get, and the emails that we get, and conversations that we're having about your needs and what you're looking for and what you're interested in. On this past Saturday, this past February, on Saturday, I talked about those workshops for laity and clergy, but on the basics and best practices. And these are the lunch and learn topics that comprise the 2022-2023 season. And just to give you an idea, I'm going to read them to you because I know you can't read them from here. But in September, we had Dr. Scott Thumma from the Harvard Institute for Religion Research on priorities for church in endemic times. Harvard Institute for Religion Research has a great Lilly grant to look at the impact of the pandemic on congregations. And they're in about the middle of it. It's a 5-year grant for them. So they're doing some great work on that. And they have a great page on their website. So I would recommend that to you. We looked at coaching services through Together We Thrive. So we do have coaching services for both individual clergy leaders and also for congregations to do the good work that you're hoping to do and develop your capacities for that work. And so if you're looking for a coach, you can call me or Heather, and we would gladly talk to you about that. Introduction to Christian Contemplative Practices was a way of Matt seeding his series and talking about that for a wider audience. So everyone, even if you couldn't participate in the series, might have an idea of the sort of focus and intention on Christian Contemplative Practices. Building Congregational Legacies with Charlie Kuchenbrod in January, Discerning Our Church's Future with me in February, and Collective Leadership and Ingredients of Future-Oriented Collaboration. Wow, that's a mouthful. Barry Shelley is in one of our local churches here in Massachusetts and works for the Collective Leadership Institute out of Germany. And they have some amazing principles for guiding collaborative partnerships and opportunities. And so he introduced some of that to us. Dr. Jerry Streets was just with us about a week ago on clergy well-being. He did a survey of over 1,500, I think, clergy in 3 or 4 different denominations and brought us some beautiful insights based on his survey. And coming up, you can still register for May 18th. Reverend Dan Smith, who is the senior minister at First Church in Cambridge, will be talking to us about local church ministry and public leadership. And we'll have a conversation on how we develop and grow our capacity for spiritually grounded public leadership. Thank you. Resiliency Time Capsule. Have you watched any of those videos? Have you listened to those stories? They're so hope-filled. They're so inspiring. And I think they're not just for the people who got to tell the stories and celebrate the good work that they did during the pandemic, but they're for all of us to be inspired and to recognize and celebrate with one another the good work that folks did, in a time of great difficulty. There are lots of lessons we can learn. So on our website, we have 4 videos. You can watch it once, and it's just about an hour, or you can watch 4 segments that are 13 to 18 minutes. There's stories of transformation and hope. You'll learn more at this year's annual meeting. Come to the annual meeting. Come to the annual meeting. Come to the annual meeting. That's can watch them right on our website by going to the Resiliency Time Capsule page, and you will get there through the purple box that says Center for Transformational Leadership. Finally, I want to tell you about ADAPT. ADAPT is a pilot program for assessment and discernment that was developed by the Center for Transformational Leadership. And it's an acronym because we love acronyms in the United Church of Christ. Can you think of any? Ours for this program stands for Assess, Discern, Align, Plan, and Transform. And it's being piloted this year. It was developed last year. Being piloted this year, we have 4 churches who have applied and 4 more churches who are looking to apply, and we will choose 4 congregations because when pilot we can only work with 4, who will be moving through a process of assessment, discernment, alignment, planning for a transformational future. The assessment, obviously, we're going to talk about your unique capacity and your unique resources. What is it that you have to work with? What is your capacity? We're going to look at and listen for God's call and consider the assessment work and discern what is God's preferred future for your church. We're going to build consensus and orient around your future mission and vision, develop a plan and strategy for moving forward in concrete ways, and then offer you a plan for your church and your community to move into God's preferred future for your church. The 4 shepherds who helped to develop the program are the people you see on the screen. Raise your hand if you know one, you probably do. Reverend Dr. Betsy Waters, Reverend Susan Murtha, Reverend Quentin Chin, and Reverend Chris Marichuk are the 4 shepherds that we worked with, and they will be piloting the 4 pilot congregations. They will be shepherding the 4 pilot congregations. They're seasoned pastors in our conference. They have expertise in congregational development. They are partners in the ADAPT program and know and care for and love the local church. And if you're looking for more information, and if I haven't said enough already, you can find us at sneucc.org/transform, or you can contact us at transform@sneucc.org. Thank you, folks.
Poor Karen, she always thinks like, how do I get through all of this? So, questions for Karen about the Center for Transformational Leadership. Any questions out there?
So I have one to learn. I'm no longer in a position where I can attend, but I have not been able to because my church had a set thing happening 3rd Thursday. And I wondered if any of them were recorded.
Yes, if you register and the presenters give us permission to record, then we will provide anyone who's registered with a link to the recording. And they're brought to you by the generosity of your proportional giving, so there's no fee for registration for lunch and learning. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
So the last talking person is me. Can you still hear me? No, okay. So listen to these numbers. About 600 churches, 1,400 authorized ministers, and 110,000 members of the United Church of Christ in Southern New England make up the Southern New England Conference of the United Church of Christ. That's also about 100 delegates at General Synod, which is, in effect, if you've already gone to General Synod training, you know the largest delegation of the United Church of Christ. Why are those numbers impactful? It means that what we do here has the value proposition of not only shaping regionally, not just for the UCC, but for our immediate covenant partners, but it does beg the question of can we model things in the Southern New England Conference that might actually move us forward as a collective covenant partner with the national setting as well. One of the things that Karen didn't say on behalf of her team is that almost every program the Center for Transformational Leadership offers is attended by conferences all over the United Church of Christ. If you're thinking about our boundary training, we've had pastors attend boundary training from Hawaii, the South Central Conference, the Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota conferences, the North Dakota Conference, the Central Pacific, you get my point. Most of what we try to curate here in a piloting fashion, the question is, again, how does this impact the church? There are three things, if you've heard me in videos and whatever talk about, that I'll say that these two things really relate to about what I hope for the about 600 churches we have in the Southern New England Conference. The first one is an invitation to be relevant. Relevant for me means how are our churches that are often in the centers of our towns connecting so much so with the community that we're offering programs, services, and resources that center the community. So that people might not just drive by and say, oh, the big church in the center of town, but they might name things like the church that helps with food insecurity, the church where we have our daycare, the church that has amazing speakers or concerts or whatever the case may be. And we have many of our churches who are doing dynamic and amazing work to be relevant in the community. As many of you know, a few years ago, Chris Davies and I surveyed about 4,000 people under the age of 40 about what they wanted to see in the life of the church for the national setting. What they all said was we want to feel that the totality of our lives can be represented in our faith community. So things like if I watch the news and I hear about this, I hope I will hear about it on Sunday. If something's happening in my state and there's a real issue on the legislative ballot, I hope my church will be inviting some of the politicians and other people there. They also said they want to do yoga in church. They want to have coffee shops at church. They want to go to these things. But the point was, these weren't people under the age of 40 who wanted to push away faith, but they wanted faith to become relevant to their everyday lives. I can't lose this point of 4,000 people collectively in a statistically significant way saying, I want church to touch every aspect of my life. They were not interested in a church that's over here and the rest of their life is here. They were asking for integration. So that's an invitation that I think each and every one of us has. The second thing is be transformed and be transformative. And I want to say transformed first is because many of our contexts are about we have extravagant welcome. Come. But what we don't often say is, but when you get here, you really should just do what we're already doing. And so that's where the transformative part happens. If we truly do the extravagant welcome, then I think we have to do the declarative work to prepare for when the people come in the door that they are adding to the framework of who we are, not simply just being blended in. Many of you may have seen the conference has purchased the website findhopenow.org. And our hope actually is to develop probably a 6-figure marketing plan in all 3 states for the United Church of Christ in Southern New England. One I was talking to Raquel earlier, I am disturbed in every state, because I'm in all of these different states, of seeing this billboard that's been purchased by one of our lovely church denominations in this area that says, choose heaven or hell. Call 83-TRUTH. And somehow somebody on the other end is going to tell you everything that you need to do to not be in hell. And I would rather have a billboard that says God doesn't hate you. God welcomes all. Faith can also be an active part of your lives. So we are going to be meeting David Figliuzzi, who is our Director of Philanthropy and does a lot of our outreach work. We're going to be meeting with a marketing firm next month to talk about what hopefully will become not only billboard templates, but downloadable templates for all of your churches, where you'll be able to literally flop out graphics fairly simply, put constant and I think continuous imagery and words that when people see certain symbols or items, they think, oh, that's that church that welcomes, that loves, that's open and affirming, that's this and all that. Now I know some folks say, but that's not all of our churches, and that is true. The reality, though, is how do we continue to have the communication across even all of the different ideological frames within this conference so that when we are welcoming people into something, we know what we're welcoming people into. I am very concerned about a growing church. because I don't believe we have to buy a narrative of a dying church because there's too many people looking for hope. They may not be looking for church in the way that we have structured ourselves, but they are looking for hope. They're looking for a community of people who will love them. They're looking for a community who will be with them when their mom dies, or when their grandparent transitions, or in my grandmother's case, most recently when her dog passed away. And I sat with her on Facebook and read every comment that came from the members of the Southern New England Conference, some of whom have never met her and others who have. And I watched her weep at the love of the community. That wasn't about a hymn. That wasn't about it. That wasn't about a building. It was about a community that crossed all kinds of boundaries. That's what it means to be not only transformed as our churches, but then how are we transformed? And I think we need to be toggling in ourselves and think about that. The work that Eric is talking about in terms of digital ministry, I think it helps with that. I think the work that the Center for Transformational Leadership is, effectively, you should see that as the teaching and learning arm of the conference. If there's anything, as a local church person, you're thinking, gosh, I wish we had training on X. I would invite you to go to the CTL website, and if they've either done it, or they're planning to do it, or there's a recording for it. I'll say this in this room, but don't record it. One of the things a few years ago in the Southeast Conference, and I'm looking at you, so don't. Convergence was formed, and it wasn't called that at the time. And for many people, Convergence, which is really the teaching and learning arm of the United Church of Christ, for many years, the price point is high. The accessibility sometimes has been difficult, and often it's been a resource that's been utilized by a lot of our Big Ten churches. Our advent is to create something in the Center for Transformational Leadership that is far more accessible and affordable. So most of you will know many of the programs in the CTL office are paid for by the proportional giving of our local churches and therefore are free to you. And to our siblings across the country, they pay a non-proportional giving rate. And if they would like to pay into proportional giving, we'll give it to them free too. But the point is available to them. And, so we talked about this first notion of being relevant. We talked about being transformed and transformative. And the last one is where we struggle sometimes in New England. So take a deep breath. Be prophetic. Prophetic is really about naming that which we can't even see right now, bringing it out into the open and declaring it, and then doing the willing work of the Holy Spirit through us to bring it to fruition. So when we talk about the national setting, giving $15,000 to the Southern New England Conference to create an augmented reality church, I might say that's prophetic. When we think about who are we calling to Southern New England to pastor in our local churches, I might say that's prophetic.
Yes.
This year, at the Justice Summit, we will be doing the whole Justice Summit on transgender belonging. I'm sorry, folks, there is no denomination in this country that has done a Justice Summit on trans and non-binary belonging. In Texas and Alabama, New York. And so even that program, which will actually also be a place of breath for our trans and non-binary siblings, we will make even that virtually available. So I imagine that people from all over the country will be attending these kind of things to be strengthened and empowered, but most importantly, know a God that loves and accepts and welcomes them. So tonight was just 2 examples of many, many other programs. And this program, as I stated earlier, will rotate the programs out every year to give you a deeper dive, to help you go to the websites, to tell your friends and congregations and in your associations so that people might start utilizing the resources as opposed to wondering, is there anything available? I celebrate this year, we were at 105% of our OCW. And I think some of the matrix and the messages that our churches sent were appreciation and belief in what the conference is doing and where we can move forward. For those of you who have been at the GROW event, you've heard me say this, and I really do fundamentally mean it. I often introduce myself as Reverend Grow Goodwin, Faith Congregational and Asylum Hill Congregational Church in the Hartford Association. Why is that important? Because I'm not doing this on behalf of a group of people. I'm doing this also on behalf of myself as a member of the Southern New England Conference. Most of our staff are members of our local churches. Many of them are serving in their local church. They're deacons, or they're on the trustee board, or they're a council member, or whatever the case, or they're an individual deacon. So everything our staff invests in, we're doing it collectively so that we might all benefit. So I say that because I think sometimes we have the notion of the conference. Well, the conference is each and every one of us. Proportional giving pays for a select group of the collection of us to do deliberative work on behalf of the mission of Imprint. But I don't ever want us to feel like anything we talk about tonight, from Center for Transformation Leadership, from digital ministry, from the 3Ds I mentioned, every one of you are participating in that. In ways that you may be able to name immediately, and in ways that you may not be aware of. My hope is that at some point in the Southern New England Conference, we might say an amazing environmental justice program is happening in Providence. And maybe I am not doing that in East Meadow. But we are doing an amazing racial justice ministry over there. Collectively, we are doing amazing environmental justice work, amazing racial justice work, and not feeling like our little church has to do everything, because we might say, we know a church who's doing amazing programs in that, we're going to invest in that, you should go there for that, or they're giving the resources so that they can collectively be used. We're on the way. Some of our churches are already doing that. Sharing and resources, sharing and finances, sharing and pastoral coverage. It's happening, but we have to tell the story a little bit more. So I hope that from the presentations tonight, you are a little inspired about like, oh man, my proportional giving is doing something. Maybe something is happening here. I want to give a couple of breaths for any questions you have kind of about big ticket conference things, and then we are going to end the night with a lot of sugar. Give you a pep for the rest of your evening. The hospitality of this church has been phenomenal, so thank you so much, Joy, and for our deacons who have provided for us. But any questions? Virginia, I know you have one. I see you have your pensive face. Any questions that you have about big tent conference things or movements, vision, mission? Give me some practice for annual meeting. Come on.
I just want to ask to be part of this congregation, of this large group, this faith community. I would really like to see more talk about justice, social justice, racial justice. I would like to see the public conversation move forward through the church. And I think from what you have told us that these digital solutions might really help with that. Have you seen an ongoing conversation like that? We did a social justice workshop last fall. Last fall?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was really transformative about how you look at the world, how you treat your neighbors, how you can conduct day-to-day operations with people you don't know.
Just to your point, I actually feel like so many of our churches are actually the spokespeople for this kind of justice work in the particular place that they were in. About 3 months ago, I was visiting one of our local churches who probably has about 30 people in membership, and they were in the middle of search and call. And that church has a tradition of when a particular justice issue comes across their particular conversation, then they stand outside of their church and model protest signs.
Right.
And so it's this amazing thing that people, and they were sharing their testimony, that people in town said that they've started to rearrange their driving pattern so that they can drive past ask the church to see what's the new issue, what's going on, and they usually have a hunt for justice, and people hunt their horns, all of it. And it's the way the town has started to grapple with particular issues because this group, this bunch, stands outside and they stand and they do it. I mean, I think these are the ways that we may say, and when I was there visiting, they're like, oh, that's probably not a big deal, it's just for our time. And I'm like, no. So I think that Tiffany ended up doing an article in the conference 5 days about that congregation. I do believe that that's happening. Part of what I see my job as conference minister in terms of the external facing is to be in all of the places that maybe we either have historically not been, or we need to be in again, so that we might answer the questions, ask the things. I was sharing with Raquel. A couple of weeks ago, I was at Connecticut Business and Industry Day as the only collared person there, and I already have emails from clergy all over saying that they will go with me next year, so that we can have a couple of roles and make the business leaders a little bit like, what's happening? But there was a moment where they were talking about, for instance, the transparency of salaries when you post a job. And the business industry community was saying we shouldn't put that. And the state should not force us to be able to talk about what the salary is. You should go through the process, interview, and then in negotiation, we should be able to tell you. And so as the faithful voice in the room, I could say, somehow that seems a little unethical and unfair. And even and it at least sponsored a conversation. And maybe got a little bit of like, so tell me why you were at this event. Somebody did actually come up, it was polite, but it was like, I'm confused. Like, why would the church do? But it's because if we are going to be a relevant church, then the church actually does have to ask questions like that. Like, why would you not have salary transparency? I'm having a meeting in 2 weeks with the Department of Economic Reform or something, I can't remember the name of it, one of our state departments. I walked up to the executive director of that office for the state, and I said, you talk about vitality and the purpose of these towns and how they come alive. You talk about arts organizations, you talked about community organizations. Not one time did you mention faith community. And she took a step back and she said, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and you know, in 15 years, not one person has ever asked that question. So, in 2 weeks, I have a meeting with that whole department. Not just to talk about the United Church of Christ, but to talk about the value of a faith community in the economic development of a state. That is, that in terms of pushing that agenda, I think the more we do that, and the blessing of, I don't have a church, that's not my, I mean, personally, I'm doing that on behalf of our churches, so that we might talk about how do you do that imprint in the towns.
You have to be careful, though.
Say more.
Church and state should not be together. You have to be careful. Don't cross them.
There's a difference, though, between working with the state and becoming an agent of the state.
Yes, we don't want to be state, but we're not going to help the state. You know what I'm saying? I think the tension, though, is to believe the only way our state is going to move forward has nothing to do with communities of faith. And I think that's also dangerous. Because then you have, when they were talking about, for instance, I'll use an example. They talked about the migrant populations that are moving into New England particularly because of more socially just and welcoming opportunities. And I offered, do you know that most of the migrant communities that are coming in all 3 states are often housed, stewarded, and funded by churches? Churches who are willing to take people in, churches who are willing to clothe people, churches who are willing to provide housing. These are the things that we do as a faith community. So to not even be a part of the conversation, you're missing a critical component of how you say welcome in a workforce. You know, and this is Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. The absence of workforce populations. Oh, please.
In Faith and Leadership in February, an article was published. Rural churches are economic powerhouses for their communities. Even simple things like thrift shops that don't look like they're putting a lot of money into the community. Sometimes they enable people to get jobs because now they've got enough clothes that they can go out. When we feed people, when we hire somebody, some kid from high school to do the music.
Or do the digital ministry.
Oh, there you go.
I got 2
I was like, 3 states, a lot of school. But the fact that our local church, near that school, provides meals for students who don't have to come to worship, they don't have to be a part of the framework, but when their meal card runs out, the church is providing those meals. And so those kids, over generations, have been like, okay, when your meal card runs out, you know you can actually go get food at, X congregational church. Those are the imprints that I think we have to be more publicly, vocally telling about. Because otherwise it's like, oh, why, what do you mean? I mean, we're talking about theater.
You can do that online, yeah.
Virtually, you can do it within those groups. Basically, what I'm saying is, tell what you're doing. I think the other piece of congregationalism is sometimes a little bit of a shyness. Somehow they'll know. And I'm saying, no, they might not. Particularly in a forum like that, where, I have to say, I was stunned to have a state leader say, 15 years, no one has ever mentioned faith communities. That's a problem. I mean, I get what you're saying. We don't want to be back to the 1700s where we're appointing the governors of the states and so on and so forth. But that's that. Any other questions before we do a blessing and go over to fellowship with each other? Let's say a little prayer. Creator of all things, thank you so much for this opportunity to see the possibilities in digital ministry, to see the possibilities in the Center for Transformational Leadership, but most importantly, to see the possibilities in the faces and the lives and ministries of all those who are sitting in this room. Holy Spirit, breathe on us anew. Revitalize us, refresh us, help us to build on the generative work that has already been done of the foreparents of our churches and associations and conferences, and help us to be about the work that you're calling us to do even now. We ask that you take every calorie out of every cookie and we trust you for this. Amen. Thank you so much. Please accept some hospitality. And Tiffany does have a new events newsletter, so if you want to be on it, you just text GROW to that number and you will automatically be added. And you will get messages from our team. So let's go. I think you can, this way.